The courtroom doors swung open with a soft creak and she stepped inside alone, her shoes clicking against the polished floor in a steady rhythm that betrayed none of the storm inside her. The room was cold not just in temperature but in feeling. Rows of wooden benches empty except for a few scattered people waiting for their own hearings, a bailiff standing stiff near the judge's bench and him. He sat at the long table on the right side, the side that had once been theirs together, now claimed solely by him. He wore a crisp navy suit, the one he always wore when he wanted to appear successful, important, untouchable. His hair was perfectly combed, his tie knotted with precision, and when he saw her walk in without a lawyer, without an entourage, without even a friend at her side, that smirk spread across his face, slow and certain, like he had already won. It was the same smirk he had worn the day he told her he was leaving, the same one he flashed when he emptied their joint savings account, the same expression that said, "You are nothing without me, you have no power here, you will lose everything." She did not look at him. Instead she walked to the plaintiff's table, the empty side, and placed her leather satchel down gently. She smoothed her skirt, a simple gray wrap dress, nothing fancy, no designer label, just clean lines and quiet confidence. She sat and folded her hands in front of her, palms down, fingers relaxed. She stared straight ahead at the empty judge's bench, waiting. The bailiff called the case number, his voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room. Family Court Division B. The man across from her stood immediately, adjusting his jacket, straightening his posture like an actor stepping into the spotlight. He nodded at the bailiff, a practiced gesture of respect that never reached his eyes. The side door opened and the judge entered. Everyone rose. The judge was a woman in her late 60s with silver hair pulled into a neat bun and eyes that held both warmth and steel. She moved with a grace that came from decades of commanding rooms like this one. She settled into her high-backed chair, arranged her papers, and looked out at the courtroom with calm authority. Then she did something unexpected. She did not look at the case file in front of her. She did not glance at the clerk for guidance. She looked directly at the woman sitting alone at the plaintiff's table, and she spoke her name, not as a question, not as a formality, but with recognition, with respect. "Good morning, counselor," she said, her voice clear and steady. "We have been expecting you." The smirk vanished from the man's face so quickly it was like someone had wiped it away with a cloth. His jaw tightened, his shoulders stiffened. He turned his head slowly toward the woman, as if seeing her for the first time, really seeing her, not as the quiet wife he had dismissed, not as the woman who cried in the kitchen after he criticized her cooking, not as someone beneath him, but as someone who belonged in this room in a way he never anticipated. The woman did not smile, she did not gloat, she simply nodded once toward the judge, a small respectful gesture between professionals. The man's lawyer, a man in a rumpled suit who had been shuffling papers, now froze mid-motion, his pen hovering over a legal pad, his eyes darting between the judge, the woman, and his client, confusion spreading across his face like a stain. "Your Honor," the lawyer began, his voice uncertain, "this is a civil matter, a divorce proceeding. We were not notified that counsel would be representing the plaintiff today." The judge adjusted her glasses, the light catching the silver frames. She looked at the lawyer without blinking. "Counselor," she said, addressing the woman, "is not here as representation, she is here as a witness. The district attorney's office has joined this matter due to evidence of financial misconduct uncovered during discovery." The man made a small sound in his throat, not quite a gasp, not quite a cough, but something caught between panic and disbelief. He turned fully toward the woman now, his eyes wide, searching her face for answers. She gave him none. For 2 years he had controlled the narrative. He filed for divorce first, claiming irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew it was because he had met someone younger, someone who laughed at his jokes without questioning them, who didn't challenge his decisions, who made him feel like the king he believed himself to be. He moved out swiftly, taking what he wanted, leaving behind furniture, bills, and silence. He hired an aggressive lawyer who filed motion after motion, dragging the process out, making every decision a battle. Child support, spousal maintenance, division of assets, each one became a weapon he used to wear her down. He transferred money between accounts, telling her the business was struggling when really he was building a nest egg for his new life. He told their daughter that mom was being difficult, that she was making everything harder, that if she would just sign the papers this would all be over. He never asked what she did all day after he left. He assumed she spent her time crying, cleaning, applying for jobs she would never get. He never wondered why she stopped arguing, why she stopped responding to his texts, why she simply said okay fine whatever you want. He mistook her silence for surrender. What he did not know was that her silence was strategy. While he was smirking at his lawyer over expensive lunches, she was sitting in a quiet office downtown surrounded by case files and financial records. While he was moving money through shell companies, she was tracing every transaction with a patience he could not comprehend. While he was telling friends she had lost her mind, she was building a case so thorough it would make prosecutors take notice. She had not always been a lawyer, but she had become one again after he left. Not just any lawyer, a specialist in financial crimes, someone who understood how money moved, how lies were built on spreadsheets, how greed left fingerprints on every document it touched. She had put her career on hold years ago to support his ambitions to raise their daughter, to build a home he now treated like a temporary rental. But a mind trained in law does not forget how to think like a lawyer. It only waits for the right moment to wake up. And that moment was now. The judge turned her attention to the man, his lawyer still sputtering about procedural errors, about lack of notice, about rights being violated. The judge raised one hand slightly, not a dramatic gesture, just enough to quiet the room. This court, she said, has a responsibility to address criminal conduct when it surfaces during civil proceedings, especially when that conduct involves fraud against the state, against employees, against family members. She paused, letting the words settle in the cold air. The evidence suggests your client diverted significant funds meant for payroll taxes into offshore accounts while simultaneously claiming financial hardship in these proceedings. The man's face had gone pale, the confident posture gone, replaced by the slouch of a man realizing the ground beneath him is not solid but sand shifting, pulling him under. He looked at the woman again, really looked at her. And for the first time he saw not the woman he married, not the woman he left, but someone else entirely, someone who had been watching, waiting, learning while he was too busy smirking to notice. She met his gaze finally. And in her eyes he saw no anger, no revenge, no satisfaction. Only clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you must do. The judge nodded to the side door and a new figure entered, not a lawyer, not a clerk, but a representative from the district attorney's office, holding a tablet and a thin file folder. The civil hearing was over. Something else had begun. And the woman who walked in alone was no longer alone in the way that mattered. She had the law with her. She had the truth with her. And she had waited long enough for both to speak. The man finally understood what he should have seen from the start. Her walking in alone was never a sign of weakness. It was a promise. A promise that when the truth arrived it would not need an army to stand behind it. It would simply stand, and it would be enough. The courtroom shifted like weather, changing from calm to storm in a single breath. The district attorney representative, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense posture, placed her tablet on the evidence table. She tapped the screen once and a document appeared on the large monitor facing the judge, the bailiff, and everyone present. It was a ledger, simple in design, rows of numbers, dates, descriptions of payments in and out of a construction company account, the kind of document that would put most people to sleep, but to those who knew how to read between the lines it screamed. The representative did not speak right away. She let the silence grow thick, heavy. The man across the table shifted in his seat, his knee bouncing up and down, a nervous rhythm he could not control. His lawyer whispered something to him, but he did not respond, his eyes locked on the screen. Then the representative pointed to a single line on page 47, May 17, 2 years ago, 3 days before he filed for divorce. $2,300,000 transferred to an account in the Cayman Islands labeled as equipment purchase. But there was no equipment. The representative explained in a calm, even voice that investigators had traced the money through 3 shell companies, 2 fake invoices, and 1 very real yacht purchased by a man who suddenly had more money than his tax returns suggested. The man made a sound, a small choked noise he tried to cover with a cough, but it was too late. Everyone heard it. The judge did not react, she simply nodded for the representative to continue. Next came the payroll records. For 6 months his company had failed to pay federal payroll taxes. Instead, that money went to the same offshore account, then to luxury purchases, a sports car, a vacation home in another state, renovations to his new girlfriend's apartment, all while he claimed in divorce filings that the business was struggling, that he could barely afford child support, that he needed to keep the marital home because it was his only asset. The woman at the plaintiff's table had not moved. She sat perfectly still, hands folded, watching the evidence unfold, not with satisfaction but with a quiet sadness. This was not how she wanted to spend her days, exposing the man she had once loved, the father of her child, but truth had its own gravity. It pulled you toward it whether you wanted to go or not. The man's lawyer finally found his voice. "Your Honor," he stammered, "this is highly irregular. We were not given discovery on these criminal allegations. This is a violation of my client's rights." The judge looked at him over her glasses, the light catching the silver frames. Again she spoke slowly, each word measured and clear. "Your client's rights were not violated. He had every opportunity during discovery to disclose financial records. He chose not to. The plaintiff submitted a motion to compel those records 3 times. Each time your client claimed the documents were lost in a server crash, a story that collapsed when forensic accountants recovered the very same files from a backup drive your client controlled." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "The court does not look kindly on fraud, especially when it harms others beyond this marriage. These unpaid payroll taxes affected 23 employees, people who relied on that money for groceries, rent, medicine." One employee testified that she had to choose between filling her child's prescription and paying her electric bill that month. The man flinched as if struck. He had never considered them, the employees, just names on a payroll sheet, numbers to be minimized, expenses to be cut. He had thought only of himself, his new life, his freedom from a marriage he found boring, from a wife who asked too many questions. Now those numbers had faces, names, stories. The representative from the DA's office continued presenting evidence, one piece after another, like tiles forming a mosaic of deception. Bank statements showing cash withdrawals labeled as business expenses but actually used for gambling trips, text messages to his accountant instructing him to backdate invoices, emails to his new girlfriend promising her a life of luxury once the divorce was final, once he had squeezed every last dollar from his soon-to-be ex-wife. Through it all the woman said nothing. She did not need to. The evidence spoke for itself. But then the representative did something unexpected. She turned to the woman and asked a single question: "Counselor, based on your review of these records, how long would you estimate this pattern of financial misconduct has been occurring?" The woman stood slowly. She did not rush, she did not perform for the room, she simply rose and faced the judge. "Approximately 7 years," she said, her voice steady, clear. "I first noticed discrepancies in our joint tax returns 6 years ago. Small things, missing deductions, unexplained income. I asked him about it once. He told me I did not understand business finance, that I should trust him. I was raising our daughter, working part-time. I believed him." She paused, not for effect but to gather herself. This was the hard part, not the legal arguments, not the financial analysis, but the memory of trusting someone who did not deserve it. 3 years ago I found a second phone hidden in his gym bag. I did not look through it, I put it back. I told myself I was being paranoid, but that night I could not sleep, so I did something I had not done in years. I opened my old law school textbooks. I began studying again quietly at night after our daughter was asleep. I refreshed my knowledge of financial law, forensic accounting, fraud detection. I told no one, not even my closest friend. Why, she asked herself later, was it instinct or something deeper, a part of her that knew even before she knew that the foundation of her life was built on sand? She continued, speaking to the judge. I began keeping my own records, copies of bank statements, credit card bills, tax returns. I stored them in a safety deposit box under my maiden name, a habit from law school when we learned that evidence must be preserved not for revenge but for truth. 1 year ago I discovered the offshore accounts. I did not confront him. I contacted a former professor who worked with the district attorney's office on financial crimes. I shared what I had found, not as a wife wronged but as a legal professional presenting a case. She looked at the man not with hatred but with a profound disappointment, the kind you feel when something you believed in turns out to never have been real. I gave him chances, she said softly. After I found the first account I left the documents on his desk open to the relevant pages. He never mentioned it, never explained, never apologized. He simply moved the money again to a new account as if I were a minor obstacle to be navigated around, not a partner, not a person. The courtroom was utterly silent, even the air seemed to hold its breath. The man stared at the floor, his shoulders slumped, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume, something he had put on to play a role he was never meant to play. The representative from the DS office nodded. Thank you, counselor. She turned back to the judge. Your Honor, we are prepared to file formal charges for wire fraud, tax evasion and misappropriation of employee funds based on the evidence presented today. We request the court hold the defendant pending arraignment given the risk of flight and further asset concealment. The judge considered this. She looked at the man, then at the woman, then at the evidence still glowing on the screen. Bailiff, she said, please take the defendant into custody. The man did not protest, he did not argue, he simply stood when the bailiff approached, his hands trembling slightly as they were cuffed behind his back. He looked once more at the woman, his ex-wife, the woman he had underestimated, the woman who walked in alone. And in that final look there was no smirk, no arrogance, no contempt. Only the dawning realization that he had not lost because she had outsmarted him. He had lost because he had never truly seen her at all. As he was led away, the woman finally sat down, her body relaxing for the first time that morning. The battle was not over. The criminal case would take months, maybe years, but something essential had shifted, something that could not be undone. The truth was no longer hidden. It sat in the open for everyone to see. And in that light no smirk could survive. The judge adjourned the civil proceedings pending the outcome of the criminal matter. She did not look at the woman as she left the bench. She did not need to. They would speak later at home over tea, the way they always did after difficult days. For now the woman gathered her things slowly, carefully folding documents, placing them back in her satchel. She did not hurry, she did not celebrate, she simply prepared to leave the same way she had arrived, with dignity. But as she stood to go, the bailiff approached her holding out a small slip of paper. A note passed from the defendant before he was taken to holding. She took it, unfolded it, her hands steady. 3 words written in hurried script. I am sorry. She read it once, then folded it again and placed it in her pocket, not as forgiveness, not as closure, but as evidence of a moment, a crack in the armor of a man who had finally seen what he had done. She walked out of the courtroom alone again. But this time the loneliness felt different. It felt like strength. It felt like peace. It felt like the beginning of something new, not built on sand but on truth. And that was enough. The courtroom emptied slowly, people filing out in hushed groups, their whispers fading down the hall. The woman remained seated, gathering her papers with deliberate care, each document placed precisely in her satchel, her movements calm, measured. The storm had passed through this room and left a strange quiet in its wake. Outside in the hallway the man stood with a court officer on either side, his wrists still cuffed behind his back, his expensive suit now rumpled, his hair disheveled. He looked smaller somehow, the confidence that had filled him just an hour ago completely gone. He caught her eye as she stepped through the courtroom doors and nodded once, a sharp quick motion that said, I need to speak with you. The officers hesitated, looking to her then to their supervisor. She gave a small nod, yes, she would hear him. This was not about mercy, it was about closure. They moved to a small alcove away from the main flow of traffic, a quiet space with a bench and a water fountain. The officers stood a few feet away, giving them space but not privacy. This was not a reunion, it was an accounting. You planned this, he said, his voice low, rough with emotion. You let me think you were broken, you let me believe I was winning. All this time you were building a case against me. She did not sit, she stood facing him, her posture straight, her gaze steady. I gave you 18 months to tell the truth, she said. After I found the first hidden account I left the papers where you would see them. I waited, I watched, I hoped you would come to me and explain. I hoped you would choose honesty over greed. He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. Honesty, what would that have gotten me? Nothing, you would have left me anyway, you were already pulling away. Was I? She asked softly. Was I the one who stayed late at the office every night? Was I the one who started taking calls in the garage? Was I the one who told our daughter her mother was too busy for her school play? He looked away, unable to hold her gaze. You took her college fund, she continued, her voice still even but with an edge beneath it. The account we opened when she was born, the one with her name on it. You transferred every dollar to that offshore account the week before you filed for divorce. You told me the market had taken a hit. You told me not to worry, we would rebuild. I needed that money, he muttered. The business was in trouble. The business was fine, she said, and you know it. Our daughter asked me last month if she would still be able to go to college. She cried in my arms, wondering what she had done wrong, that her father would take her future away. I held her and lied. I told her everything would be fine, all while knowing you had stolen from her. His face crumpled then, not with remorse, not yet, but with the shock of realizing his actions had a shape, a weight, a human cost. He had thought in abstractions, numbers on screens, assets to be moved, liabilities to be hidden. He had not thought of a young woman with dreams of studying marine biology, of late nights studying for exams, of a future she believed was secure until it was not. Where is she now? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Our daughter. She is with my sister. She is safe. She is loved, and she knows the truth. His head snapped up, eyes wide with fear. What did you tell her? I told her you made serious mistakes. I told her you broke the law. I told her you took money that belonged to her and to other people who needed it. I told her the courts would decide your punishment, but that she did not have to carry the weight of your choices anymore. Tears welled in his eyes for the first time, real tears, not performative, not manipulative, but the raw, unfiltered pain of a parent realizing they have failed their child in the most fundamental way. She asked me to tell you something, the woman continued, her voice softening slightly. She said she hopes you find a way to become the father she remembers from when she was small, the one who taught her to ride a bike, who read her stories at night, who told her she could be anything she wanted to be. She said she is not waiting for an apology, she is waiting to see if you will change. He wept then openly, his shoulders shaking, his body bent forward, the officers shifting uncomfortably but making no move to intervene. Some moments demanded witness, not interruption. After a long minute he looked up, his face raw, his eyes red. I never meant to hurt her, he said. I got caught up in the money, the power, the feeling that I could have whatever I wanted whenever I wanted it. I forgot what mattered. You did not forget, she said gently. You chose to ignore it every time you looked at her, and lied every time you promised her things you had already taken away. You made a choice and you kept making it day after day. He had no answer for that because there was none. The officers stepped forward, then, their duty clear. The arraignment awaited, the processing, the beginning of a long journey through the justice system. As they led him away he turned one last time, his voice cracking as he spoke three words that carried the weight of everything lost. I am sorry. She did not say it is okay, because it was not okay, not yet, maybe not ever, but she nodded once, acknowledging the words without accepting them as absolution. Later that afternoon she drove across town to a small house with a garden out front. Her sister waited on the porch, their daughter sitting beside her sketching in a notebook, the sun warm on their faces. The car door closed softly and the girl looked up, her pencil pausing mid-stroke, her eyes searching her mother's face for answers. It is done, the woman said simply. He has been taken into custody. The criminal case will move forward separately from our divorce. The girl nodded, slowly closing her sketchbook. She was 17 with her father's eyes but her mother's quiet strength. She had spent the last year watching her parents unravel, watching promises break, watching money disappear while explanations grew thinner. Did he say anything? the girl asked. He said he was sorry. The girl considered this, not with a child's quick forgiveness nor with a cynic's dismissal, but with the thoughtful gravity of someone forced to grow up too fast. Words are easy, she said. What matters is what he does now. Her mother sat beside her on the porch steps, the wood warm beneath them, a breeze rustling the leaves overhead. You are right, she said. Words without action are just noise. Their daughter looked down at her hands, then back at her mother. I started something, she said quietly, while you were in court. I called the community college. I enrolled in their paralegal program. I want to learn how the system works, how to help people who get trapped like we were. Her mother felt something shift inside her, a loosening of a knot she had carried for years. This was not the future she had imagined for her daughter, not the marine biology degree, the research vessels, the coral reefs, but it was a future built on purpose, on strength, on turning pain into protection for others. Why, the mother asked, though she already knew the answer. Because no one should have to figure out their own parents stole from them, she said. Because no kid should lie awake wondering if they will have a home tomorrow because someone decided money mattered more than family. I want to be the person who helps them find the truth before it is too late. The mother reached over and took her daughter's hand, their fingers interlacing, a simple gesture that held everything: love, pride, sorrow, hope. You do not have to carry this burden, she said softly. This is not your responsibility. I know, the girl said, but it is my choice, and that makes all the difference. They sat together as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the garden humming with bees, the world continuing its gentle rhythm around them. Inside the house, the sister prepared tea, the scent of chamomile drifting through the screen door, a small comfort, a reminder that life went on even after earthquakes, even after foundations cracked, even after the people who were supposed to protect you became the ones you needed protection from. That evening, after the girl had gone to bed, the woman sat at the kitchen table with her sister, a cup of tea cooling before her. Do you think he will change? Her sister asked. I do not know, she replied honestly. Some people see prison as punishment, others see it as a mirror. I hope he chooses the mirror, but hope is not a plan. I am building our life on what we can control, not on what he might become. Her sister nodded, understanding this was not bitterness, it was wisdom, hard-earned and carefully held. The woman thought of the courtroom, the smirk, the evidence, the collapse of a man who believed himself untouchable. She thought of her daughter's steady gaze, her decision to study law, not for revenge but for repair. This was not a story about winning, she realized. It was a story about rebuilding, not the marriage, not the trust, not the years lost, but something new, something stronger, built on truth rather than convenience, on courage rather than comfort. The night deepened, stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky. She went to her daughter's room, pausing in the doorway to watch her sleep, her sketchbook open on the desk, a drawing of a woman standing tall before a judge, not a victim, not a victor, but a witness to truth. And in that moment, the woman who had walked into court alone understood she had never truly been alone. She had her daughter, she had her sister, she had her own strength rediscovered after years of being told it did not matter. The smirk had faded hours ago, but what remained was something far more powerful. The quiet certainty that the next chapter would be written not by the man who left but by the women who stayed and chose to build something beautiful from the broken pieces. And that was a story worth telling. 3 months passed, seasons shifting from summer heat to autumn crispness, leaves turning gold and red outside the courthouse windows where the criminal case moved with the steady rhythm of justice, not fast, not slow, but thorough. The man accepted a plea deal, 5 years in federal prison with eligibility for early release after 3 years for good behavior, full restitution of every dollar taken including interest, and a lifetime ban from serving as an officer in any publicly traded company. The judge who presided over his criminal trial noted his cooperation in identifying other participants in the fraud scheme, a small gesture that would shave months from his sentence but could not restore what had been broken. Meanwhile, the family court proceedings continued under a different judge, one who had no personal connection to either party. This judge awarded full custody to the woman, every asset the man had tried to hide, and a clean division of property that left him with only what he had acquired after leaving the marriage, the marital home, the savings accounts, the retirement funds, all returned to their rightful owner. But the real victory did not come in a courtroom. It came on a Tuesday morning in October when the woman sat in a congressional hearing room, not as a lawyer, not as a victim, but as a spectator in the third row, her hands folded in her lap, her heart beating a quiet, steady rhythm. At the witness table sat her daughter, 17 years old, her posture straight, her voice clear as she spoke to a panel of lawmakers about financial transparency in family law. The girl had started a non-profit organization using the first restitution payment not for herself but to fund legal aid for families experiencing financial abuse during divorce proceedings. She called it the Clarity Project because, as she explained to the committee, silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is how people gather evidence, sometimes it is how they survive until they can fight back. She spoke of children who went to bed hungry while parents claimed poverty in court. She spoke of college funds that vanished overnight, of medical bills left unpaid while luxury cars appeared in driveways. She spoke not with anger but with a calm determination that held the room captive. My mother taught me that truth does not need to shout, she said, it only needs to be heard at the right time in the right place with the right evidence behind it. I am here today because I want every child to have what I eventually found: someone who would listen, someone who would believe them, someone who would help them uncover what was hidden. The committee members asked questions, thoughtful, probing questions about legislation, about oversight, about how to protect vulnerable families. The girl answered each one with grace, drawing on months of research, interviews with social workers, lawyers, financial advisors. She had built something real, not from revenge but from repair. After her testimony, she walked down the aisle toward her mother, her steps light, her face glowing not with triumph but with purpose. They embraced, a long quiet hug that needed no words. You were brilliant, the mother whispered. The girl shook her head. No, I was just honest, and honesty is not brilliance, it is courage. They left the hearing room together, stepping into a hallway filled with reporters, advocates, lawmakers, all wanting to speak with the young woman who had captured their attention. She handled each interaction with poise, thanking people for their interest, directing them to her organization's website, promising to follow up. In the car driving home, she turned to her mother and asked a question that had been forming for weeks. Do you think he has seen any of this? The mother considered the question carefully. They had not spoken of him much in recent months, not out of avoidance but out of a mutual understanding that healing required space. I do not know, she answered honestly. The prison system has educational programs. Some inmates have access to news, some do not, but I suspect his cellmate or a guard or someone in processing would have mentioned your testimony, if only because your last name is not common. The girl nodded, looking out the window at trees shedding their leaves, a natural cycle of loss and renewal. I hope he sees it, she said, not because I want him to feel guilty but because I want him to understand what his choices created, not just the harm but the response to that harm. We did not break because he broke his promises, we built something new, and that is the part I hope he sees. The mother reached over and squeezed her daughter's hand, a simple gesture that held everything: pride, love, sorrow, hope. That evening they gathered with a small group of supporters at their home, friends from the legal community, social workers who had helped families in similar situations, a retired accountant who had volunteered to help trace hidden assets for the Clarity Project. They ate simple food: soup, bread, salad, cake someone had baked, and shared stories not of victory but of resilience. One woman spoke of leaving an abusive marriage with 2 children and $37 to her name. She had rebuilt her life one day at a time, eventually becoming a counselor who specialized in financial trauma. Another man shared how his father had gambled away the family business, leaving them homeless for 6 months. He had grown up to become a financial literacy educator, teaching teenagers how to spot warning signs of exploitation. Around the table, story after story, each one different in detail but the same in essence: people who had been broken by someone's greed or cruelty or indifference and who had chosen not to stay broken. The woman listened more than she spoke, absorbing the strength in the room, feeling something shift inside her, a loosening of a weight she had carried for years. She realized she was no longer defined by what had been done to her but by what she had built in response. Later, after everyone had left and the house was quiet, she stood on the back porch watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Her daughter joined her, holding 2 mugs of tea, steam rising in the cool air. Do you miss who you were before all this? the girl asked. The woman considered the question not with sadness but with curiosity. Sometimes, she answered, I miss the simplicity of believing people would always choose honesty. I miss not having to question every financial statement, every promise, every smile. But I do not miss being small. I do not miss shrinking myself to make someone else comfortable. I do not miss the woman who thought love meant accepting less than she deserved. The girl nodded, sipping her tea, the warmth visible in the small cloud of vapor she exhaled. "I never knew that woman," she said gently. "I only know the one who taught me to stand tall, who showed me that silence can be a strategy, who proved that truth eventually finds its voice. I am glad you found yours." They stood together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from deep understanding, the kind that needs no performance, no explanation, no justification. Inside the house, on the kitchen table, lay a letter postmarked from a federal correctional institution. The woman had not opened it yet. She would in the morning when she felt ready. She knew without reading it what it would contain: an apology, perhaps a request for forgiveness, maybe just an acknowledgement of harm done. She also knew she would not rush to respond. Forgiveness was not a transaction, it was a process, and she would move through it at her own pace, not for him, not for anyone else, but for herself. The night deepened, stars brightening as the sky darkened, fully a sliver of moon hanging low on the horizon. The woman put her arm around her daughter's shoulders, pulling her close. "We are going to be okay," she said, not as a hope but as a fact. The girl leaned into her mother's side, her head resting gently against her shoulder. "We already are," she replied. And in that moment, standing under a sky full of stars, surrounded by the quiet evidence of a life rebuilt, not perfectly, not without scars, but with intention and love, the woman who had walked into court alone understood she had never truly been alone. She had her daughter, she had her community, she had her own rediscovered strength. The smirk had faded months ago, but what remained was far more powerful. A legacy of truth. A foundation of courage. And the quiet certainty that the next chapter would be written not by the man who left, but by the women who stayed and chose to build something beautiful from the broken pieces. That was not just a victory. It was a beginning.